Hello guys, welcome. So this is the latest blog post which I wrote on my website, The Limits of Metaphysics. And alright guys, so before we start, a few things to say to you. The CBSE examinations are approaching, the term 2 examinations, and we have the practical exams as well, plus the pre-boards and everything. So I will be I will not be uploading any more videos to YouTube till the month of May, and I'm so sorry that I couldn't upload the educational videos, the lectures, because I told you in previous videos the reason, so it's not possible for me right now. But that will not make a huge difference. You can go check out the other awesome content on YouTube. So I will be taking a break from YouTube because of my exams, but I'll be back with more interesting videos, so you can subscribe to me if you're not subscribed. And from May I'll be working on something big, so you can expect interesting content on my channel, so that's for sure. And I think this will be the last video on my YouTube channel before the month of May, because the exams will be ending on May. So yeah, now this video I'm mainly making because the limits of metaphysics, it's a very important blog post from my, because in this blog post I have discussed all about my fundamental ideas about the fundamental nature of reality. So I have had a talk with some of my friends and some of my teachers or mentors about this model. So they were a bit like, most of them were a bit, they couldn't understand the model very much. Like they understood it, but they couldn't understand what was the basic, like the basic essence of the model. So, and some other people also requested me to make a video on it, or like explain the topic. So that's why I want to explain this topic to you in today's video. So first of all, before we start, the limits of metaphysics. So we'll mainly discuss the limits of metaphysics, why metaphysics cannot answer the most fundamental questions. If some of you may think that metaphysics may perhaps answer the deep questions, like what is time, what is the origin of everything, does God exist, what is consciousness. But actually, at least according to me, even metaphysics cannot answer these questions, because these questions may always remain unanswerable. What is the point, you ask, then in trying to find the answers? That's very satisfying, and we can discover a lot of other information on the way. So definitely we should keep searching for the answers. But at the same time, we should keep in mind that a final answer to these questions may well be impossible. So, and yeah, one more thing before we start, this is just solely my ideas. Now, I have not read these ideas anywhere. I have not taken these ideas from any book or from any online whatever. But so these ideas are solely my own. But if they happen to be, if you find some similarity with some other ideas already existing out there, I'm sorry for that, but I'm not aware of any such thing. And next thing is that since these are only my ideas, now none of this is official metaphysics. We are not doing official metaphysics. It's just my personal ideas. So if you're interested, you can watch the video. Alright guys. Where do we stand in terms of understanding the world around us? We can discuss this from two perspectives. One, the metaphysical perspective, and also the scientific perspective. Okay, so by the metaphysical perspective, I mean how far can we attempt to answer really deep, fundamental and metaphysical questions about the origin of our universe, the origin of time, etc. By the scientific perspective, I mean how far can we explain the world by doing actual science, devising theories and experiments. In this blog, I'll be discussing the metaphysical approach, because I've already discussed the scientific approach in my previous blog. You can check it out here in my blog. A question that has been bothering me lately, this basically discusses the theory of everything, the string theory and loop quantum gravity, and like the scientific approach into understanding the world around us. Alright. One more thing before we start, this is not official metaphysics. This is simply my chain of thoughts about metaphysics. I've already told this. I don't claim these to be my original ideas, but it's true that I have not read about any of this anywhere, and this is all my argument. So take it with a pinch of salt. Very important. So take it with a pinch of salt. Yeah, I always welcome constructive criticism if you and these ideas are very these ideas are these ideas are prone to change with time, and these ideas are not like at this point of time I'm perceiving these ideas to be correct. Maybe some other day I will have some other realization and I will understand that this was all wrong maybe. So So yeah, if you find anything wrong with the ideas, please do comment. The comments are open always. You can contact with me. You can go to my website and click on contact, and you can drop me a message, or you can email me at arpan2004@gmail.com. I'm always open to arguments, especially about this model. I really want comments. I really want feedback. And this is not a particular academic scientific model. Like, you don't need to be an expert in the field to comment. This is just general philosophy, general metaphysics. Anyone can understand this model. Anyone can comment. So please watch this video. To address very fundamental questions, we must begin with the reasonable assumption that at the most fundamental state, no particular phenomena should be preferred to occur over any other phenomena. Now, from this point, I understand that it might be a bit difficult for you to understand what I'm talking about, but I will try my best to elaborate. So what is our target? To address very fundamental questions. To address very fundamental questions, like what is the origin of everything? Not just this universe. I'm not talking about the universe. Even before that, what happened at the beginning of time? Or is there a beginning of time? Or is time eternal? Or is there anything called time at all? Like these kind of questions, fundamental questions. So to address very fundamental questions, we must begin with the reasonable assumption that, what is our reasonable assumption? At the most fundamental state, no particular phenomena should be preferred to occur over any other phenomena. So why am I calling this a reasonable assumption? Because what is the negation of this statement? Suppose I am saying no particular phenomena should be preferred to occur over any other phenomena. What is the negation of this statement? The negation of the statement is some particular phenomena are being preferred to occur. Like nature is giving some preference to some particular phenomena, so that some things are occurring and some things are not occurring. So if that is the case, however, suppose we assume for a moment that that is the case, then we cannot explain why that is the case, right? We cannot explain why that is the case. See, if this is not assumed to be the fundamental working hypothesis, we must explain why a particular phenomena is more likely to occur. Because, like, see, on the earth, we can say that I'm dropping an apple, so it's likely not. We know that the apple will fall down, apple will not go up. We know that due to the gravity of the earth, or if we go deeper, due to the curvature of the earth and everything, the mass of the earth. So, but basically, at the most fundamental stage, which you're considering, the most fundamental state, at that state, there was no gravity, there was nothing, there was no science. We cannot apply any concept of science at that state. So we cannot assume, we cannot explain anything by any scientific method or anything. So that means we cannot explain any preference at that state. This point is very crucial. You have to get this point. We cannot explain any sort of preference at this state. That's why we have to assume, we must assume, the only possible alternative for us is to assume that no particular phenomena should be preferred to occur over any other phenomena. Because there must be no preference, because we cannot explain the preference. We have no means to explain the preference. That means there must be no preference. Explaining this fundamentally is extremely difficult, because the problem of explaining what decided this order of preference, so if we assume that there is some preference, then we cannot explain this fundamentally. It's extremely difficult, because the problem of explaining what decided this order of preference, who decides that this particular phenomena should occur and this particular phenomena should not occur, because we cannot use any science or any logic there, because at that fundamental stage we cannot say that anything is forbidden, because then we have to explain why it is forbidden, and we cannot find a fundamental reason for that. Like, suppose if I ask you, why is the speed of light 3 into 10 to the power 8 meter per second? Now, there are some modern physicists trying to answer this question. Like, some of you may say that it's an accident. It's the universal speed limit. It's an accident that it's 3 into 10 to the power 8 meter per second. It could be maybe 2 into 10 to the power 8 meter per second. It could be 5 into 10 to the power 8 meter per second. It's an accident that it's 3 into 10 to the power 8 meter per second, and maybe in some other universe it is some other value. The speed of light is some other value. Light is something different in some other parallel universe. You can say that, but yeah, there might be some answers to these questions also. We need to ask the why. But at the most fundamental stage, there can be no explanation like why this should be the case and not that should be the case. Suppose at the most fundamental stage, if we're talking about speed, though the notion of speed is not a correct one, at the most fundamental stage there was no speed, nothing. But if we talk about speed, then all the possible speed should be manifested there. We cannot say that this particular speed should be the likely one, because no preference should be there. I'm telling you again and again. So I hope this makes sense to you. And if you have any problem with my arguments, you are obviously free to comment your opinion below. I'm not saying any of this is 100% true or everything. It's just my opinion. So in answering the question without some answering the question of what decides this order of preference without some presupposition is impossible. You must realize that for our hypothesis to be called a fundamental one, we must base it on little or no presuppositions. I discussed this when I was discussing the scientific method about the what was that? When I was discussing about the background independence and background dependence of string theory and loop quantum gravity. So background independence means the background is derivable from first principles. The background you do not need to fix the background for the theory to work. So that is what should a fundamental theory be like. That is what a fundamental theory should be like, right? So here also you see this, basically the notion is the same. For our hypothesis to be called a fundamental one, we must base it on little to no presuppositions, because if we're basing it on some presuppositions, we have to explain why, like the basis of the presupposition we have to explain, and we cannot use any logic, any science at the most fundamental state, so we cannot explain it. Now if we say no particular phenomena should be preferred to occur over any other phenomena, then we do not need to explain why this phenomena occurred before, why this phenomena occurred after, why this phenomena occurred and why that phenomena did not occur. We do not need to explain any of this. We only need to explain the origins of the phenomena. Obviously origins we have to explain, like why are they occurring in the first place, why is nothing remaining nothing, like, right? Because suppose nothing occurs, nothing, of course something must have happened, otherwise I would not be here pondering these things. The earth would not be here, even if I say this is an illusion and everything, but something must have occurred, something must exist. So I can say, why should something exist, why should something crop up in the first place? So we have to explain the origin. That is something we have to explain. We cannot, I don't see any way around this problem. But if we assume that no particular phenomena should be preferred to occur over any other phenomena, we then only need to explain the origins of the phenomena and nothing else. We don't need to explain any preference. And the lesser the number of things we have to explain, the better our fundamental theory will be. The better our theory will be, because a fundamental theory means it should be a simple one. It should be an elegant, beautiful, simple theory. It should not be a complex theory, so much presuppositions. It should be based on little to no presuppositions. As I've already said, for our hypothesis to be called a fundamental one, we must base it on little to no presuppositions. Little or no presuppositions. Before we think about the implications of our hypothesis, I should remind you that it is only a working hypothesis. While it is reasonable that this working hypothesis should hold at a fundamental state, we have no means of verifying it, because we are talking about a fundamental state. No science, I'm not talking about, this should be very clear, I'm not talking about the Big Bang or the formation of our universe. I'm talking about the most fundamental state. Like the most fundamental state means what? I will be defining it shortly in this video only. So please bear with me. Now when we think of the implications of the hypothesis, we are faced with two options. So what are the two options? I told you that there should be no preference, like this thing is occurring, that thing cannot occur, or this thing is occurring before that thing. These kind of preferences should not be there. That means either nothing should have occurred, so nothing is occurring, no preference, no question of preference. So either nothing should have occurred, or every possible phenomena must have taken place simultaneously with no single phenomena being preferred over the others. Because every possible phenomena should have taken, if every possible phenomena is taking place at the same time, then also there is no preference, right? All the phenomena taking place at the same time, so there is no preference in time, there is no preference in like of one phenomena occurring and one phenomena not occurring, because every phenomena is occurring, every possible phenomena. Now when I say every possible phenomena, you can ask, what do I mean by possible? What do I mean by possible phenomena? Then are there some impossible phenomena? The answer is I don't know, because at that fundamental state, I think we should not forbid anything. I think we should not define any impossible phenomena. We cannot define any impossible phenomena, because we cannot explain why should that be impossible. So we cannot explain any impossible phenomena. That means every phenomena should be possible. So rather than using the word every possible phenomena, I should have used the word every phenomena must have taken place. But here the possible is being used in that sense. I hope you're understanding. By saying every possible phenomena should occur, we actually mean that no phenomena should be considered impossible. I've already mentioned it. This line of reasoning justifies that we must choose between nothing and everything. Of course, I told you there are two ways. So it is logically consistent that nothing should occur. Yeah, it's logically consistent. Like why should something occur all of a sudden? Consider the most fundamental state is nothing should occur. Why should something occur all of a sudden? That for something to occur, we have to explain its origins. But if I say nothing occurs, understand this fundamentally. Let me open my notepad. Yeah. just a second. If I say nothing occurs, I don't have to explain anything. I hope you're getting this point. If I say nothing occurs, I don't have to explain anything. There is nothing to explain because nothing has occurred. What to explain? There is nothing to explain. If I say something occurred, I have to explain, this is very important. I have to explain both the origins, origins of that something, like from why, like from where it is coming, like why, from where it is emerging, we have to explain the origins of that something, plus we have to explain why only that something occurred and not something else. This also we have to explain. If I say everything occurred, I only have to explain the origins, because in this case there is no order of preference or something. There is no order of preference. There is no, like, we do not need to explain that why only that something occurred and not something else, because everything occurs, right? So our best option is, if I say nothing occurs, then I don't have to explain anything. Then it's, see, our target is to understand the world. What is metaphysics trying to tell us? What is according to me, our target is to understand the world as simply as possible, as simply, as beautifully, as elegantly as possible. So if I have an option open to me where I don't have to explain anything, that is the simplest path nature should have tried out. That is the simplest path nature should have tried out. So that is probably true. I don't have to explain anything in that case. But bear with me. We have to rule out this option. Why? Because if I say nothing occurs, then I cannot explain why am I here in the first place. Something must have occurred. Now I am left with two options. Either something occurred and some things did not occur, or everything occurred. Now among these two options, let us see in which case I have to explain less. So in this case, I only have to explain the origins. So this is my preferable option. So let me drop this option also. Let me just delete this. So I hope you are understanding the logic I have followed in writing this article, this blog, whatever you say. So yeah, it is logically consistent that nothing should occur. However, this very appealing idea cannot account for our existence. While we can't say for sure whether reality exists objectively outside our minds, it must be understood that the option of nothing existing cannot account for our experiences and must thus be ruled out. The other alternative is that everything must exist. It's obvious that every possible phenomenon that can occur at the most fundamental state is well beyond the imagination of the human mind. Why? Because we exist in a very specialized, very evolved, very complex portion of the complex evolution. Like we exist in a complex reality, very sophisticated reality. But at that state, at the most fundamental state, everything was simple, everything was fundamental. So the number of possibilities was more. But now the number of possibilities have decreased, and we are fine-tuned. Like we are born, we are growing up. We have some limitations. We cannot think beyond our limitations. We cannot think beyond these things. So that is what I'm trying to say. So it's logically, yeah, all right, this I did. So it's obvious that every possible phenomenon that can occur at the most fundamental state is well beyond the imagination of the human mind. If we assume this latter option to be the correct one, then at best we can say that the paradoxical reality we find ourselves in is simply one of the infinitely many possibilities. Please note that when we say all possibilities must take place, we do not specify whether they take place in a single system or whether the most fundamental state simply splits itself into many substates where the possibilities take place. Now at this question, like whether all the possibilities take place in the single system or whether the most fundamental state divides into different subsystems, substates where the different possibilities take place, it is not clear to me how we can go about answering this question. I have tried many different options, but it's not clear to me, because whatever I try, there are some metaphysical paradoxes coming up, some contradictions coming up. So yeah, it's not clear to me. So if there would be any comment from your side, that would be very helpful. It should also be noted that for our fundamental working hypothesis to hold, these possibilities need to occur simultaneously. Yeah, this I already told you, right? Why? Because if there can be no preference at the fundamental level, then possibility A can't be preferred to occur before or after possibility B. This means all the possibilities must occur at the same time. Also, suppose possibility A has already occurred in system A. Suppose let us assume for a moment that the fundamental system divides into many subsystems A, B, C, D, and so on. So suppose possibility A has already occurred in system A. This doesn't mean that possibility A cannot occur in any parallel system. If we assume this to be the case, we would violate our fundamental working hypothesis. Everything is based on our fundamental working hypothesis. No possibility should be preferred to occur in one system any more than the other systems. Thus, all the possibilities must occur in all the systems to not violate our fundamental working hypothesis. At this point, I would like to tell you something, which is that I'm writing this down because this is a very important point. Our target was to explain everything as simply as possible, but we have ended up creating a complex model of the reality. Right, because see, just read this line, you can understand what I'm trying to say. All the possibilities must occur in all the systems. Like in each system, suppose there are many systems, so in each system all the possibilities must be taking place. So then we have an exponential growth, like it's a complex, like we cannot stick to our simplicity anymore. Do not violate our fundamental working hypothesis. Before we proceed, it's important to define what exactly is what this I should have told you before only, but anyway, here it is. Before we proceed, it's important to define what exactly we mean by the most fundamental state here. The most fundamental state is simply the state that can be achieved only through one way, and before that nothing existed. So there are two conditions that a state must satisfy to be called the most fundamental state. Number one, that can be achieved through only one way. Like, understand this. If we say that there are suppose 2 ways or 3 to 4, 5 ways or maybe infinite number of ways to achieve a state, then that state is not fundamental, because if there are many ways, I'm writing this down for you. If there are more than one ways of achieving a state, it means that the state is usually emergent from some deeper structure. Alright guys, if there are more than one ways of achieving a state, I'm sorry for these spelling mistakes, my notepad doesn't have an autocorrect option. So if there are more than one ways of achieving a state, it means that the state is usually emergent from some deeper structure. Like, what do I mean here? It's very important actually. So there are more than one ways of achieving a state. Then can this be a fundamental state we're talking about? Of course not, because fundamental means what? There is only one way to achieve it. It's a fundamental state. Fundamental means there cannot be, suppose if there are more than one ways of achieving a state, then it is emergent from some deeper structure. That means some structure must exist before it. But see our definition. The most fundamental state is simply the state that can be achieved only through one way, and before that nothing existed, because we are talking about the most fundamental, the beginning of everything. If we assume before that something existed, something else existed, then we cannot say it's the most fundamental, then we cannot say it's the beginning. So before that nothing existed, this condition should be fulfilled. Before that nothing existed, and that can be achieved only through one state, and at the same level of which nothing exists. What do I mean by this? Suppose we can divide our states into different levels on the basis of fundamentality, like how fundamental it is. So now so at the level, so suppose at one level we're having 2 states, at one level we're having 1 state, at a different level we're having suppose 5 to 4 states. Now see, actually it should be either infinity or 1, because see 1 means why? Because the most fundamental state, or else infinity. Why infinity? Because if we assume there should be, suppose let us say 5 states, then questions will come up like why cannot there be 6 states, or why cannot there be 4 states, or why not 3? So we cannot. So we have to assume that there must be every number of states, like a level with one state, a level with two states, a level with three states, 4, 5, and so on till infinity. So we are getting infinite number of levels with infinite number of states. I mean infinite number of levels with different number of states. So basically, you can understand the problems. Already you can understand the problems which are coming up, right? So we can divide our states into different levels on the basis of fundamental. So at the level of the most fundamental state, MFS, nothing else can exist at that same level. Nothing else can exist at that same level. Okay? So this is, I hope it's clear to you what do we mean by the most fundamental state. And see, one thing is that I have tried to base this model on pure metaphysics, like pure logic alone, nothing else. No science I have used intentionally. I have used no science, no presupposition, nothing. No presupposition that this particular theory is correct, that particular theory is correct, nothing. I have based it purely on logic. But then also there are some problems which we will be discussing shortly. Now, how exactly this most fundamental state cropped up will perhaps always remain unanswerable, but it may be possible to logically predict the consequent events that followed. It may be possible. Next, we must ask what happens to the most fundamental state. We have argued that the most fundamental state may split into different substates that evolve differently to fulfill the different possibilities. It is important at this point to ask, once this process starts, whether the most fundamental state ceases to exist or it exists even after giving rise to the different substates. So see, once the most fundamental state is giving rise to different substates, suppose the most fundamental state was A, it is giving rise to B plus C plus D and so on till infinity. So after B, C, D have formed, does A exist? Does A still exist? This is what I'm trying to say. So if we assume that the fundamental state may split into different substates that evolve differently to fulfill the different possibilities, it's important at this point to ask that once this process starts, whether the most fundamental state ceases to exist, stops to exist, or it exists even after giving rise to the different substates. Like a mother, she can exist after giving birth to her children, right? Obviously, she can exist after giving birth to her children. So that's what I'm trying to say. Just a rough analogy. It's not nothing similar actually. Now, one may argue that the fundamental state simply gives rise to the different substates while still existing itself, just as the mother can give birth to children and exist herself after that. However, again, there is no definite answer to this question. The most likely answer would be the most fundamental state changes to the collection of these substates and ceases to exist in its original forms. Like this A itself is becoming B, C, and D. So A is not existing as A. A exists, but A does not exist as A. A exists as B plus C plus D and so on. Like the very nature of the most fundamental state is changing. So it ceases to exist in its original form. Now there are a few problems with our fundamental working hypothesis. What are these problems? The first question that comes up is this: do the subsystems go on evolving infinitely, or is there an end? Now, obviously, why am I asking this? Because you might think that the answer is the subsystems go on evolving infinitely. Obviously, the subsystems should go on evolving infinitely because there are infinite possibilities. But see, as the subsystems are evolving, some possibilities are eliminated. So, is it like this that maybe the possibilities are coming to an end and it's a finite process? After a very long time, it will maybe stop. Maybe all the possibilities will be fulfilled. Or like, is there an end? So there is a very crucial point. This is a very crucial point. Without going into discussions about time and entropy, I can assure you that this is perhaps the most fatal problem in our fundamental working hypothesis. And it's likely impossible to logically predict the evolution of the most fundamental state. Because see, it is likely from what we have discussed so far, it is likely that the subsystems go on evolving infinitely. But we might also, we should also consider the possibility that there is an end, because that seems a logical alternative. Okay. So we might also consider that possibility. So this is a problem. Like we should find some definitive answer to this question, but there is no answer as of now, at least not known to me. So this is a problem in our fundamental working hypothesis. Whatever solutions have come to my mind are not free of loopholes. Next problem. Yeah, this is also a very important problem. We have argued that all possibilities must occur in all the systems. Now consider possibility A, which is defined as possibility B not occurring. Some of you might have thought of this already before. I know, but yeah, here it is. It has not escaped my notice as well. I also know about this problem. So let's discuss it. Suppose we define a possibility A, which is defined as possibility B not occurring. A is what? Possibility B not occurring, that we're giving it a name A. It is clear that both A and B cannot occur in the same system, since if A occurs, by definition B cannot occur. So all possibilities cannot occur in all the systems, because there are some possibilities which cannot occur simultaneously. We violate our fundamental working hypothesis. Now this problem, there can be a solution to this problem. There can be a solution to this problem. The solution is that, like, it's not a solution actually, but like we can somewhat maybe answer this question. It is that we should not define any event as any other event not occurring. Why? No, you can say we cannot. Why should I not define? We can define any event, right? But the thing is that when we're defining event B as event A not occurring, then event B is not. Then we are basically, we are again violating our fundamental working hypothesis. We are going into these things, like where was the line? Yeah. By definition, B cannot occur. Yeah. Since if A and B cannot occur in the same system, since if A occurs, by definition B can't occur. Now the question is, define, you just tell me any two events which are like A and B, like one event is the negation of the other event. So fundamentally we cannot, let me write this down, fundamentally we cannot explain any event B which cannot occur if some event A occurs. Fundamentally we cannot explain any event B which cannot occur if some event A occurs, right? Fundamentally we cannot explain any event B which cannot occur if some event A occurs. Like we cannot explain any event, like suppose event B is what, and the event B is the event of A not occurring. Event B is event A not occurring. But how can we, but that means we have to assume, because we are assuming if A occurs, B can't occur. But this assumption is based on presuppositions and preferences. So it is a violation of our fundamental working hypothesis. All right. So this is a solution that has come to my mind, which has come to my mind. I don't know if there are some loopholes, still there are some problems remaining with this argument, but yeah, maybe it's true. Maybe we are violating our fundamental working hypothesis. We cannot define, like you can say an event of an apple, suppose an apple occupying position A, an electron, whatever, any object occupying position A and not occupying position A. So maybe at the fundamentals level, it's possible that an electron can at the same time occupy A and not occupy A, because at that stage we cannot, our known logic will fail. Now you can say that I am a lunatic because I am basing all this hypothesis on known logic. So, but yeah, maybe that's the problem. I hope you're understanding what the problem is. So, but this is a very like a vague solution. This is not actually a true solution. So that's why I have listed it as a problem, right? If I had the solution, I wouldn't have listed it as a problem. So all possibilities can't occur in all the systems because there are some possibilities which can't occur simultaneously. We violate our fundamental working hypothesis. We may assume that there are different copies of the same system, and if A occurs in one copy, B occurs in one of the other copies, but then why can't B occur in the former copy and A in the latter copy? It is clear that we cannot solve this problem in this manner. Next, let's consider the idea that there must be an overall effect of constancy. Okay, so this is a very philosophical idea. Some of you may have heard my rants on the law of averages. So what do I mean by this? Law of averages means what? Law of averages means it's see, there is a very misconception about this, very general misconception, wide misconception. The law of averages is that suppose if I get consecutive 9 heads in a coin toss in 9 tosses, then I'm more likely to get a tail in the second toss, because to compensate for the heads, this kind of thing. But this is actually not true, because even if I get 1000 times if I toss a coin and 1000 times if I get a head, even then in the 1001th time the probability is 50-50. The probability is not something like 90-10 or something like that. It's still 50-50. But yeah, it's the probability distribution, like when we are tossing a coin for many number of times, this percentage will be nearing to 50. That is true. It usually doesn't happen that you are tossing for 1000 times and you are getting 1000 times heads in a row, but it can happen. There is nothing preventing it. So anyway, see, what is this? Let us consider the idea that there must be an overall effect of constancy. So because if we assume that there is no effect of constancy, like there is some inequilibrium, some imbalance, then imbalance means only preference. Like imbalance means what? Something is more as compared to something else. Something is more than compared to its counterpart. That means something is being preferred to exist more than its counterpart. So again, there is some preference. So if we are to go with our fundamental working hypothesis that there should be no preference, then we have to say that there must be an overall effect of constancy. Everything should be constant. Every possibility should occur or nothing should occur. If this does not hold for a system, suppose for a system this does not hold, there is some imbalance. It possibly means that either the system is part of a greater system where the law holds, or the system in question is an intermediate system of a series of phenomena which will ultimately stop at a more fundamental system where the law holds. So our fundamental working hypothesis was simply that either nothing should have occurred or everything should have occurred. Now the question of how something can emerge out of nothing, since nothing existed before the fundamental state, inevitably comes up. See, we are saying everything should have occurred. Now this everything, everything, whatever we say, how can this emerge out of nothing? How can everything come from nothing? This is the valid question, very, very important question. So while it's impossible to explain this satisfactorily, a novel approach can be to assume that fundamentally all the phenomena can be classified into two categories. This is the only solution that have come to my mind. So say positive and negative. Positive and negative by convention. There is nothing positive or nothing negative about them. It's just by convention, like two opposite counterparts. One we are saying positive, one we are saying negative. Just like positive charges and negative charges by convention. So when considered in its entirety, the fundamental state is simply the sum of equal amounts of positive and negative, thus zero. Now question is like, how did these categories emerge and why cannot there be more than two categories come up and may be unanswerable for all we know. However, by assuming that ultimately the fundamental state consists of nothing, that's equal amounts of positive and negative, we actually stick to our fundamental working hypothesis that nothing should have occurred. Equal amounts of positive and negative means nothing. Suppose -2 + 2, that is 0, right? But it's something. But suppose I roll a die. Suppose not the die. Suppose I have a die on one side of, suppose I have a box or something like a small block, wooden block. On one side I have written +2, on one side I have written -2. So overall it's 0, right? If I see the die as a whole, it is +2 -2 0. Overall it's a 0, nothing. But suppose if I see only one face of it, if I am seeing only the +2, I cannot see the -2. Suppose -2 is on the other face, I am seeing only one face of the die. Then I will think that something exists. This +2 exists because +2 is definitely something. +2 is not 0. But when I consider the thing in its entirety as a whole, then I am realizing that it is 0. +2 -2 0. So that is the point. I hope you are getting it. But the concept of positive and negative is too vague. This is the problem. This is the problem. I don't see any way out of this. Like maybe this is a good approach, this dividing into two categories. But yeah, there are some problems with this approach also. There will be some problems, whatever approach we try. However, let us assume that the most fundamental state simply splits into two states where possibilities of opposite nature, we define them as positive and negative just for convenience, takes place. Where possibilities of opposite nature takes place. Possibilities of opposite nature take place. You may ask what determines whether the positive possibilities will take place in the first state or second state. But this is not a problem because see, there is really no concept of first or second with these states. They are just opposite of each other. This is the opposite of that, and in the same way that is the opposite of this, and in their entirety they represent nothing. +2 -2 0. Here we have assumed that nothing is something and nothing can be manifested either by nothing or by equal amounts of positive and negative. On a darker note, very, very important, on a darker note, it may, however, be the case that we are just playing around with words and our language can never truly express what happened at the most fundamental state? That is also possible. Maybe this nothing something, we're just playing around with words. Maybe our language is binding us, our language is confining us, our language is placing limits on how much we can know. Maybe we can never truly express what happened in the fundamental state. Well, let's try. Just a little bit is left, little bit more is left. Don't watch this video on one go, just please bear with me. Pause and watch, but it's very important video, right? If you are all right. But there is a problem with this idea as well. Consider this question. If a shorter and easier path is available, we just said that we should try the simplest path, right? So if a shorter and easier path is available, why should a fundamental system not take that path? The following discussion would explain the relevance of the question. It can be comfortably assumed that the goal of a fundamental system is to conserve everything. We already discussed. Conserve means if it's not conserving everything, that means only preference is there. That means we will be running into problems. In simple words, if it was initially 0, it must remain 0 in the end. There are two ways to achieve this. First, the system just remains in its initial state. 0 remains 0. Nothing remains nothing. This is the easier way, but as we've already discussed, this cannot explain our existence. The other way is to create equal amounts of positive and negative, and already discussed that sums up to 0, as already discussed. So this is the difficult way, because you have an option that nothing remains nothing. So that's the easier way. Then why should you create equal amounts of positive? Then you should create equal amounts of negative. Then that should sum up to 0. Why should you go the higher path? Like go the difficult path. So this is the difficult way, but the more likely one as well, because something must have occurred. That is also true. So this simply means that our world is existing in a small portion of either the positive or the negative, and there must exist a parallel system, an exactly opposite world. Like some of you may have heard the idea of CPT reversed universes, charge parity time reversed universes, CPT symmetry in physics. Very, very important. Like it's a very, very fundamental, very profound idea. Like this symmetry in physics, it's a very beautiful idea. I'm really left in awe and shock like every time I think about it. CPT symmetry and just symmetry in general. So anyway, now opposite in what sense? I just said that there must exist in a parallel system an exactly opposite world. Opposite in what sense? We cannot answer fundamentally. We don't know simply. Unless we assume that choosing each path is a possibility. Like the easier path, nothing remains nothing, that is also a possibility. The difficult path, so that equal amounts of positive and negative, that is also a possibility. So unless we assume that choosing each path is a possibility, and in some other system at the same level, the easier path has been chosen, there seems to be no fundamental answer to this question. But if we say that in some other system at the same level, the easier path has been chosen, assuming this would conclusively prove that what we are considering as the most fundamental system is not the most fundamental system, is not that. Since a different system at the same level must exist where the easier path has been chosen. The most fundamental state is the single state that exists at the most fundamental level. I already discussed this. But if I assume that at the same level some other second system is existent, then that cannot be the most fundamental state. The most fundamental state is the single that exists at the most fundamental level. There is only one way to achieve that state. Before that nothing existed, and at the same level of which nothing can exist. If the latter assumption is false, it would mean that those two or more than two states are emergent from some deeper state, which would contradict the fact that nothing can exist before that state. I hope you get this point. So this is also a very fundamental problem with our hypothesis. Now we are faced with the question, how far can we explain the world around us from the metaphysics perspective? We may conclude that the idea that there should be no kind of preference at a fundamental level is false, because it gives rise to some logical problems. Our basic idea we started with was that there should be no preference at a fundamental level, and now we are faced with 3 to 4 logical fundamental problems. So this means someone or something beyond our knowledge must be responsible for this preference. There must be some preference. We may also conclude that our knowledge is incomplete, and although the idea that there should be no kind of preference at a fundamental level is true, we are not yet in a position to understand the full implications of this statement. In the end, we can say that it's likely we would never be able to answer the most fundamental questions satisfactorily. Even if we can create a complete picture of our universe using the physical sciences, it would be far from a model for the fundamental nature of reality, a model which would hold beyond our universe everywhere. While the progress in the physical sciences is promising in every sense of the word, our arguments above show only too clearly that we very likely cannot form a complete and paradox-free picture of the most fundamental state. All we can do is try out different hypotheses which are based on some presuppositions. And even then it is likely we will not make any significant progress. This only goes to show that metaphysics is useless. This is a very bold statement, because, and metaphysicists out there will disagree with me obviously, but yeah, it's true. I myself at one point of time I was very obsessed with metaphysics, and even now I like it, I love it, but still it's maybe useless. I love it doesn't mean, suppose love is not logical, love is not, if you love a person it doesn't mean that person is good, you're blinded by the love. So that's why I am blinded by my love for metaphysics. But metaphysics is useless. I cannot, I see through my love. I have the capability to see through my love. I understand that metaphysics is after all useless. It cannot, all we can do is focus on practical science and attempt to make the world a better place to live in. Metaphysics is useless. This is, I cannot deny that. Although I love metaphysics, but I cannot deny that. So allow me a few more comments on consciousness, the free will and determinism. This part I will be discussing in a separate video. So I hope this video was, I just discussed the basic ideas, you know. So I just discussed the basic ideas, and you understand what I'm trying to say. My basic ideas about the fundamental nature of reality. I intentionally did not bring consciousness into the picture, because consciousness is something again different. That would take a lot of time. It's already, let me see, it's already a pretty big video. I hope you're understanding. So that's all guys. Thank you very much. Please comment if you like.